Hi, I'm Bryan Quinn. I am owner of One Nature, a beacon-based company that designed, built, and now takes care of Safe Harbors Green here in Newburgh. Safe Harbors Green is an amazing initiative by Safe Harbors of the Hudson, and it's really about bringing people and nature together. We're in an urban area here. People are starved for areas where they can feel like they're in a refuge and have a place to go within the city to relax and slow down a little bit. It's also a fantastic spot for performances and arts programming that Safe Harbors of the Hudson does throughout the year. Included in all that, it's also a real ecological refuge for all sorts of insects, pollinator species, birds, something that Newburgh sorely lacks. In fact, this park is the most biodiverse by square foot park in the entire Hudson Valley. I'm standing, for example, right in front of this plant, which is an ironweed plant. It's near the end of its flowering period. It's a very upright plant. Pollinators love purple and yellow flowers generally. It's something they see really well. In addition to the habitat that we've created, I'm standing at the top of what's called a swale, the design feature that's like a low planted ditch, and it carries stormwater to intentional points throughout the landscape. We use that stormwater to plant different types of moisture loving plants. We use it to create aesthetic forms like fluvial forms in the landscape, and we use the swales to actually clean the stormwater, cool it, so by the time it reaches Newburgh's city sewer system at the end of the park, it's a pure, clean, completely filtered water. So now I'm standing down in the swale itself. You can see I'm a little bit lower than the ground around me. This here, this little plant, this is called an American cranberry plant. It has little red berries, come out about this time of year. We have in this whole park over 50 different native plants. Almost all of them we collected from seeds ourselves and grew in our nursery and brought here and planted them. This large planting bed behind me is like the feature pollinator habitat, food producing area for insects and birds. It changes throughout the year. Different things flower at different times. It's a very dynamic system. If you were to zoom out and fly into the air from 1,000 feet and look at Newburgh, and you were a bumblebee or a migratory bird, this is the place you would come. This is the place with the most diversity. This is the place with the most feeding opportunities. Here I am sitting on one of the many custom designed benches in the park. These benches were designed by a local architect named Jeff Wilkinson, who has a studio here in Newburgh. The bench is made with kiln-fired ash, which is a locally available species, and these benches are an example of how we use the best environmental ethic we could in everything in the park. We have as little concrete, as little steel as possible. It's also really comfortable. We designed it with a nice firm back where you can lean back, and most of the benches in the park are oriented towards the performance spaces in the park. Here I am at the end of the upper swale system, deep in the shrubbery of the park, so to speak. I'm standing in front of a Sweet Bay magnolia, which is the only native magnolia to the Hudson Valley. It has a really neat bud and flower that forms. It's almost shrub-like. It will eventually get 5 or 6 times as tall as me, but at the moment it's doing quite well for being 4 years old. Behind me is a sandbar willow. There's 9 different types of native willow plants in the Hudson Valley. This is one of them. It loves wet feet, which is why we put it right here at the end of this swale system. The water comes down, hits these boulders, and trickles over in a mini waterfall to where I'm standing below. From here, it sits, infiltrates into the ground, fills up, and then flows underground into the next section of the swale, which I'll take you to in a minute. So here I'm standing in the center of a designed, what we call a council ring of large boulders, which is a concentric circle intended to gather people together. It's also kind of the center of the park, not just on the horizontal XY axis, but on the vertical Z axis. We've created a series of terraces out here, and this is kind of right in the middle, on level with the middle lawn here off to the side. This stone is really interesting. We worked with the natural colors of it and the natural shapes of it to create the seating experience, but also retaining walls in the park, dry waterfalls, all sorts of features have a consistent aesthetic with the stone and reflect the local geology. Here I am down in the middle swale where the water flows over a series of boulders down to the lower swale system. All of these plants, when we planted them in the ground, were about that tall. A few were about as tall as I was, like maybe this American cranberry came waist high, but everything else here was just little baby plants. And now to see this all mature and grow and kind of cohabitate with each other is really inspiring. Another interesting factoid is that there's not a single weed in this entire park. Every plant here is intentional and allowed. Twice a month we come here, we weed the park, we care for the park, we do spot replantings. Everything here is exactly how we want it to be. Right here, I'm standing in front of one of the only features left on the site from before we started. It's this old foundation wall. There used to be a building behind where I'm squatting. We felt that that was historically important. It also gave us an opportunity to backfill the lawn behind here and create a terrace area to create this like middle landform where other types of events could happen. We capped it with this ornamental bluestone. Bluestone comes from Pennsylvania and New York area. It's all a very local stone, and it also functions as a seat wall. Just as above we have that bluestone capstone cap above the historic wall, we repeated that material here above these concrete blocks. These feet form a nice seat for the performances, and we chose another bluestone, two more bluestone materials, this stone dust on the bottom, on the paths, which is ADA accessible. That's Americans with Disability Acts. Most of this park is accessible by wheelchair, which was very important in the design of the park. And then we have this other bluestone here, which is a massive bluestone slab, probably weighs 500 to 1,000 pounds, and it has what we call in garden design a lot of wah. It's like a lot of energy from the stone itself, a lot of geological energy. So when you stand on it, you feel like you're standing on something substantial. It's not just for that though, it's also a bridge over the swale system in the park, which emerges. That swale came down the waterfall into this holding basin and then comes under this large stone out into this lowest swale system. Right here is the outlet point for the entire swale system. When the water fills up to the height of the swale, it trickles over and into this big steel grate, and then that goes into a big 24-inch pipe at the bottom. Once the water comes into here, it's very clean, crystal clear, filtered by plants, and it travels underground behind me to a vault underground, a buried like kind of intersection for stormwater before traveling out to the street. All the water that overflows comes out of these two rectangular pipes which travel right under this concrete slab of sidewalk. This is really neat to see actually emit water, because the water that comes out is so clear and so fresh. Once it comes here, it travels down the curve and goes into a catch basin down at the bottom of the slope here. Interestingly, if you came here 200 or 300 years ago, you would see a stream at the bottom of Ann Street, at the bottom of this block, which has since been channelized and then boxed in and then paved over. But there is still an active stream running down there, which eventually feeds into the city's stormwater system and discharges into the Hudson River. You can see behind me how we created a terraced amphitheater lawn. We created a series of rooms, slowly stepping up more and more until we get up to the elevation of Broadway. Behind me here are two downspouts that come from the new roof on top of this historic building. We've been working very closely with the theater design team to make sure that the design of the landscape and the new theater building are integrated as much as possible. So in addition to catching all the water that falls in the park, we're now taking all the roof water that falls on the building and treating and catching that as well. So here I am standing on the sidewalk on Broadway, which is really like Newburgh's Main Street, right in front of the park. We really wanted to create a strong green face to the park. It's a lot of eyes on the park from this direction, and we wanted to have people feel invited to the park. The park is open 24/7 to anybody, anytime, as long as they follow certain basic rules. Really, really important to urban fabric to have a green space to come to and have a place that feels like you can get into. At the same time, I've been talking a lot about having a refuge kind of feeling in the park where things are quiet or things are, you can get away from city life a little bit. We also wanted to maintain sight lines into the park so that people using the park, especially at night, felt safe walking through the park and felt like they could be seen from different angles. So here we are at the high point of the park near the intersection with Broadway. You can see behind me the topography, how it falls away, and how we created a series of outdoor rooms and a series of terraces in the park. You also get a sense of the immense biodiversity here. This is a really great spot to just appreciate the whole landscape and get a quick understanding of what the park's all about. Thank you for joining me on this tour today. I want to wrap up by just promoting the work that Safe Harbors of the Hudson does and make a request that you donate to Safe Harbors of the Hudson. Landscape is really the slowest form of art. It takes time to grow and develop. We had a really great initial push on this park, and we're keeping it up, and it's a fantastic spot, but over time we need more money to keep the great things we're doing happening, to integrate with the new theater building, and just to generally continue the stewardship of this park. It's certainly worth it to the people of Newburgh, and also to the bumblebees and the songbirds and all the other ecological fundamental critical things that rely on this park.